So what are SARMs? SARMs are known as selective androgen receptor modulators. I think the best way to jump into the understanding of these molecules is they work in a similar way to androgens. They're presently being looked at as alternatives to the use of androgens like testosterone and so forth in the treatment of specific clinical issues in males and females. And I think, from my standpoint, it's very important to understand clinically if you're going to choose to use a molecule or a peptide or a supplement in clinical practice. You need to adhere to understanding the mechanisms of how a particular molecule works in the cell and how it is clinically effective and viable for a patient to be utilizing in daily care. So when we look at SARMs, I think we have a background of understanding that we've studied and used molecules called SARMs, selective estrogen receptor modulators like tamoxifen, which is a well-known drug that we use, that's used in cancer, breast cancer. That has been a well-studied, well-evaluated, clinically tested molecule that has brought great benefit to people around the world. And that has led to more focus on evaluation of other selective type of modulators, that being selective androgen receptor modulators. And this is nothing new. This has been research that's been done for the last 20 years, but it's still in that research phase. Number one, first and foremost, there are no clinically indicated FDA-approved uses for SARMs. End of story. That's primarily, I think, one of the most important things that need to be made relevant right now, because there are significant aspects that need to be understood about utilization of SARMs. And I hope to make that very clear and simple by just giving you some of the basics in understanding where I see this presently. I think SARMs are an interesting modulating molecule that I think in the future could have significant benefits in helping us treat patients in the future. Right now, it's not ready for prime time. It's just not there. And the reasons, not only because of the FDA approval, but the fact that there are no, in the United States, there are no wholesalers that legally will sell to a pharmacy to sell to the clinician. So you've got to be very careful when you start looking down this avenue of using something that is not FDA approved in this fashion and is not something that wholesalers right now will be selling to compounding pharmacies. At least I don't know of any. So someone can enlighten us and tell us where that's coming from, then I'd like to know. The other thing that's important to understand is that SARMs have gained their popularity in the bodybuilding world and through supplement companies who have been trying to skirt around using this as a natural supplement and not being a drug. Well, the FDA came out and said this is a drug and this can't be sold as a nutritional supplement. So that's the end of that story as far as SARMs are concerned. They've actually followed through with cracking down on many online facilities that are selling SARMs. That being said, the investigational aspects of looking at SARMs, here's the other issue, is where is your source coming from? Does it have that approval to be sold to a compounding pharmacy? Because then you know that you're getting your purity and sterility and all the things that are important when you're prescribing to your patient. They've done the studies and looking at the sourcing of supposed SARMs around the US and around the world, and it's alarming to see what has been purported to be a pure product hasn't even been close to 50% of being what a SARM is supposed to be. So unfortunately, there's been a lot of misrepresentation with this science, which is unfortunate, and with these molecules. And that has led to significant problems, clinical problems for patients that obviously, as a responsible clinician, we don't want to be part of any of that. So I think you really have to think about that when you're going down this road of being responsible to your patient and looking for the best outcomes and what's clinically relevant. So with that being said, understanding that sourcing is an issue, FDA approval is an issue, there should be no question here as to the utilization of SARMs as we know them today. You know, I can bring this even to more relevance. Like, one of the most popular SARMs utilized today is LGD 4033, I think it is, or just known as LGD. And that SARM has been through some clinical studies and it's always, you're going to hear people say, well, they have low toxicities and they're more selective for tissue, so there's less problems. Well, in this specific study that was used for that specific SARM, they did show good selectivity, they did show good muscle protein synthesis, and basically good improvement of protein turnover and protection of losing protein, thereby making muscle mass with less androgenic effects, which is all good. It's just showing more selectivity for the androgen receptors. But the problem here is that the dosing was significantly low in what is utilized out there, where people are using these in the bodybuilding world, but also what I see being used clinically and what is being suggested out there clinically to use as a dose, which is 10 times the dosing that you see in the clinical studies that showed tolerance and selectivity and toxicity. So you can't compare that. You can't compare that because nobody's using those doses. So you need to understand that, because what does that lead to? Well, that's what's led to the problems and why the FDA is so concerned about hepatotoxicity and lowering lipid levels and issues with causing testicular shrinkage, and because you do shut down the HPA axis, you will shut that down, especially with the dosing that's used out there today. So there are a lot of relevant points that if you're going to promote the use of this in clinical practice, well, first of all, I think you got to represent the science, and you got to know where the science lies. And here's the importance. Here is the basis of why understanding cellular mechanisms are so important in how we make good decisions in deciding how we move forward in translating a molecule or a peptide or a supplement into clinical use. And here it is. A SARM is, again, a selective androgen receptor modulator. So this modulator, the way it works is it finds its way to diffuse into the cell. Its primary action is going to be in the nucleus, just like an androgen. Just like, let's say, testosterone broke down to DHT, where DHT is going to have its effect in the nucleus too. It's where hormones work in the nucleus. But what happens is this androgen receptor is usually, it's occupied or it's held by a heat shock protein, and it's in the cytoplasm. when this selective androgen receptor modulator comes into the cell, it frees up that androgen receptor from the heat shock protein to where they combine. And then that enables the androgen receptor to enter into the nucleus. And because of the selective androgen receptor modulator, remember I say selective, that's a really important word, because depending on that molecule, that is, and its interaction with the androgen receptor, it is going to affect the transcription in the nucleus of different proteins that are relevant to that selective androgen receptor modulator, meaning different SARMs have different transcription factors. So when you see all these studies done on SARMs, there are different compounds that have different transcription activities specific to what we may be looking at clinically, like breast cancer or cachexia or benign prostatic hypertrophy or urinary outflow problems or muscular dystrophy or neurodegenerative diseases. If you look in the literature, they're all different SARMs. So you can't blanketly say like LGD is going to do all of these things that we're only looking at right now presently from the cellular side in mouse and rat studies showing changes that are specific to a different selective androgen receptor modulator. There's a big difference there, a big difference. And so what I want to implore on you is the science is amazing. This field is going to absolutely grow because it is selective, and we're understanding more about how we can influence different transcription factors with other co-proteins that are going to affect these specific proteins that are going to be made by the nucleus to assist in these different aspects of what androgen receptors have their ability to do, mainly in building muscle, stopping proteolysis, and working on other aspects that may be important in like prostate cancer or benign prostatic hypertrophy, as I said. And in fact, just to take that another step, a recent clinical study being done on SARM, a specific SARM with BPH, and just recently in phase 2 clinical trials had to be stopped because it wasn't working. It wasn't working, and there were unwanted side effects. So we need to just back down here and really think about what we're doing. And if we can put together, I think the science is absolutely necessary to understand, because it's only going to make our clinical decision making better. And I think with some of the things I've discussed in just a very short period of time, where this would be a wonderful debate to have. I would love to have a debate with anybody out there that's clinically using these in practice and have a good conversation of the pros and cons and why, again, just my opinion, this is not the right time to be jumping on this bandwagon of promoting something that is potentially harmful to the patient, has no FDA approval whatsoever, and we have no idea of sourcing. I mean, those are red flags. So again, I support the science, I support the selectivity of these agents. The emerging research is only growing because this will come to fruition, where we'll have some very interesting selective androgen receptor modulators at some point. But they're not here yet. And I think we're doing a great disservice by even trying to promote the usage of this process right now in our patient care. And again, that's my opinion, but I think the science validates what I'm saying, and I think you need to inform yourself the best you can to make your own decisions. And I think I make a pretty persuasive argument. So thanks for joining me here in just letting me give you some of my insights and brief, analysis of a growing aspect of literature on SARMS, and to let you know that I fully support the literature and science behind it. I think there's going to be a future in SARMS, but right now, today is not the day to be starting Monday practicing with SARMS and using your patients in a way that I think is not going to be beneficial for anyone at this time in your medical practice. So thank you so much. Come and visit us at the SSRP. Come learn about the cell. Come learn about why mechanisms are important in making your own decisions and not letting people persuade you that this is what you need to be doing. We're all about you learning. We're all about you making your decisions because you're intelligent enough to make sense of this. And that's what we do. We give you the tools to make good decisions. So thank you for letting me spend the time to come in and introduce you to something that I felt compelled to make some statements about. Take care.